You're watching News at Prime. Let's get into another important discussion. Human Rights Watch is warning against what it says is toxic rhetoric that is being used against foreign nationals by some political parties ahead of the elections. The group also warning against using migrants as what it says, and I quote, pawns. They're warning that this is endangering the lives of the people. Let's discuss this now with Human Rights Watch's Noma Masiko-Mpaka and the Patriotic Alliance's Deputy President, Kunene. To both of you, thank you very much for your time. I'm going to start with you, Ms. Masiko-Mpaka. When you warn that political parties must not use toxic language, particularly language that's directed at foreign nationals, what kind of language have you observed during this campaign period?
Firstly, I think it's important for us to note a few things, Oli, is that when we're talking about sort of anti-immigrant rhetoric in South Africa, is that it's not taking place in a vacuum, right? It's taking place in a context where South Africa has been grappling with sporadic and sometimes lethal xenophobic harassment and violence, right? Against African and Asian foreign nationals living in the country, both those who are documented and those who are undocumented, one. Two, I think it's also important for us to note that we're in a context where we have vigilante groups that are operating in our communities and targeting and harassing foreign nationals who own businesses, preventing them from accessing healthcare in public hospitals, etc. And then thirdly, I think it's also important for us to note that we're in a context where we have service delivery protests that are actually on the surge as we're leading up to the elections, where citizens are angry, they're frustrated, they're disillusioned and facing all manner of socioeconomic challenges and issues in terms of accessing basic services in their communities. So that's the context where we're operating under. And so if you're in that context, and then you have, political parties that say, Mabahambe, we will turn off, life-saving machines in hospitals to undocumented migrants who try to access healthcare in public hospitals. If you have, political parties who talk about migration as being out of control. I mean, I heard the other day, I think it was a member of the DA who had said, it's a free-for-all. People come in and out of South Africa as they please, insinuating some sense of lawlessness or a lack of rule of law. And I think also we've witnessed a number of political parties as well who've talked about the asylum seeker system being a de facto permit for economic migrants. And this is, in a way, feeds into a narrative of bogus asylum seekers. And we know that in the context of Africa in particular, but also other nations that are going through conflicts and other human rights challenges, we have a number of refugees and asylum seekers coming into South Africa to seek refuge because of fear of persecution. And I think it's incredibly problematic, incredibly harmful, and irresponsible to have political leaders who use that kind of language that in a way delegitimizes and nullify those who come into the country as legitimate asylum seekers.
All right.
And of course, we've seen the scapegoating, which is continuous, blaming, foreign nationals for all our social ills, drug peddling, unemployment, crime. And really, I often ask myself this question, Oli, if all the foreign nationals in South Africa were to leave tomorrow, would our problems go away? And I think we know the answer to that. It's a resounding no.
Well, let's put that question to Mr. Kunene. Mr. Kunene, you've heard the comments. Mabahambe will switch off machines in hospital. I think both those actually can be attributed to your party because this is the kind of language that has become familiar with the Patriotic Alliance. Would the problems of South Africa be resolved if foreign nationals left?
Some of the problems will be resolved, Xoli. I don't know what is this Human Rights Watch is watching. Heavily pregnant women get on buses at Beitbridge in Lesotho. They come to Park Station, go to Rahima Musa Hospital, pay nurses 1,000 rands for them to skip the queue, go on the beds. South African pregnant women are lying on the floor. Buses, farmers in the Western Cape take buses to the rivers of Lesotho and transport illegal Lesotho nationals to go and work in the farms so that they don't employ South Africans.
Yeah.
Warehouses everywhere in this country employ illegal immigrants at the expense of South Africans. Our youth unemployment is over 60%. Our adult unemployment is over 35%. Yet there are illegal immigrants that are employed in this country. So I don't know what is it that they are watching when it comes to human rights. Deep Sloat has been marching almost every month because of the killings at the hands of illegal immigrants who don't get arrested because their fingerprints are not on the system.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they're watching. So I'm saying, when we say Abahambe, we understand the negative impact of illegal immigrants. Once you say somebody is illegal, it means they've committed a crime.
Yeah.
Serious countries behave like that. 3 weeks ago, there was a press briefing by one of the ministers in Zimbabwe. They've arrested 30 Malawians who were illegal in Zimbabwe and deported them back to Malawi. So Zimbabwe is assisting us because those people are not going to Zimbabwe. They were coming to South Africa. Zimbabwe is assisting us to deal with the issue of illegal immigration.
Yeah.
You've got local economy that has been taken over by Pakistanis. The ANC government has taken the instruction of big business to open borders so that big business can employ illegal immigrants because South Africans want a basic salary.
Yeah.
So slavery is happening in our country. So when we say they must go, we are actually taking them out of slavery because they are being treated worse than the dogs of their masters.
Sure. Ms. Masego Mpaka, let's come to you. You have had quite a detailed response from Mr. Kunene, but I'm paying attention to the language you use in your statement where you talk about irregular migration and you say this narrative that migration is out of control. Is it not out of control if you take just what Mr. Kunene is saying, some of which, by the way, is quite true because we have reported on it on this station and we can't deny some of what he's saying.
Absolutely, Xoli. I think it would be remiss of me not to outline off the bat that there are legitimate issues in terms of border control and irregular migration. I think if we want to be kind of politically correct, we refer to irregular migration, not illegal migrants. Nobody is illegal, but people are undocumented or they're irregular. And I think that's because I think language matters as well, Xoli, is that when we call something, we need to also bring back the humanity in people and not just tossing them aside as people who are illegal, therefore criminals, but using language that still brings back the humanity. So I think it's important for us to, of course, acknowledge that we have legitimate issues of border control and irregular migration. But I think my issue and our issue as an organization is that we can't scapegoat foreign nationals, those irregular or regular, for the issues that we see in the country. And I think the other thing that I really want to also underscore, Oli, is the idea of freedom of speech and hate speech, and that slippery slope and sort of thin line that we often see, because we want, particularly in this election season, for us to have free speech, freedom of expression, and really have very constructive debates around the direction of the country on a number of issues, right? Yeah. But I think what we are seeing, though, is that we're not seeing that kind of constructive debate where we're trying to find solutions to issues of border control in the country and irregular migration, but we're seeing language that sows divisions and effectively incites violence and has the potential, rather, to incite violence because we're operating in a context where there's constantly issues that are simmering up and brewing in terms of kind of, relations between the locals and foreign nationals, particularly in your lower income communities. So I think for sure, Babu Kenny, there are issues there, but I think we can't throw it all to foreign nationals and think that if they were to go away, our problems would go away, because our problems would not go away. I think we need to be thinking around how to, for example, I think there was a debate recently that I saw around, just increasing the number of border control offices that we have in the country. I mean, there were comparisons that were drawn between the UK and South Africa, and in the UK is a fraction of the size of South Africa. So there's practical ways in which we can deal with border control and irregular migration. And that is basic sort of systems and controls. But if we're going to throw, this back to migrants and refugees and asylum seekers, I think that is not going to be encouraging. That is not going to fix our problems. And in fact, it's just going to sow more divisions and violence in the country.
All right. Kunene, I know that you're itching to respond to that, but I have to take a break. So when we return, we're going to try and explore these practical ways of dealing with this situation without using language that is inflammatory. You're watching News at Prime. If you're just joining us, you find us at the tail end of a discussion with Human Rights Watch's Noma Masiko-Mpaka and the Patriotic Alliance Deputy President Kunene. The issue at hand, the discussion, is to do with what the Human Rights Watch is warning is toxic language by politicians towards foreign nationals. Mr. Kunene, you heard just before we went on a break, is there a way, can we find practical ways of dealing with the problem of what Ms. Masiko-Mpaka chooses to call irregular migration? Because language also becomes very important. Is there a way to deal with this in a manner that does not inflame emotions so that it doesn't incite violence? Are there practical ways that you think South Africa can deal with this?
Yes. The ANC government will say undocumented. Nice way of saying illegal. Now, this is a new one of irregular migration. It's a new one. I've never heard of that one. Asylum seekers. Which country is at war in Africa? And why are these people every December going home and coming back, yet they say they're asylum seekers?
Well, I can tell you the DRC, Eastern DRC, is at war.
The DRC is at war. But why are they going back home in December? Because all these foreigners who are here, in December they go back home. So they are not asylum seekers. They are using that status to come into South Africa. That's one. Two, there is a way of dealing with this, a practical way of dealing with this problem, is to mass deport all illegal immigrants, is to mass deport all the illegal Chinese that have been brought here through the harbor, that are working there in the south of Joburg. Dragon, what. There are flats there that have got Chinese, illegal Chinese that are working there. South Africans are not employed. The mass deportation of Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, and Ethiopians who have taken local economy from our people. The practical way is to mass deport them. They must tell us which harbor they came in, which airport they came in. We dump them there, and they must leave. The most practical way is to mass deport all the Nigerians that are in Sunnyside, that have conquered Sunnyside and colonized Sunnyside. There's the Nigerians and the DRC people, Mozambicans, that have colonized Hillbrow, Rosettenville. People's houses have been hijacked. So we need to mass deport them. That is the practical way of solving our problems. In Rwanda, Kagame dealt with this issue properly. Rwanda is one of the cleanest countries. In fact, it's the cleanest city. Kigali is the cleanest city in Africa because Kagame became decisive.
How so?
You go to El Salvador.
No. Let's stay in Rwanda. How do you think Rwanda has dealt with this issue?
He became decisive. Number one, he said, if you are a pastor, you are not from Rwanda, show me your qualifications. If you don't have, go home. He deported all of them. He said, our country must be clean. He said he dealt with the issue of crime. Do you know that the rhinos that are said to be under threat in South Africa are in Rwanda. And they are not being guarded, they are just being fenced because there's law and order in Rwanda. Here you got police service, not law and order.
All right, can I just say this? Are you aware that Rwanda has a deal with the United Kingdom to bring migrants that are in the United Kingdom illegally to be deported to Rwanda? And I can't tell you what the deal is between the Rwandan government and the United Kingdom.
It's a monetary deal. I can tell you what it is.
So when you say Rwanda has dealt with this, I'm keen to know whether you have a deeper understanding of exactly what's at play.
I have.
Yes.
Rwanda has deported illegal immigrants.
Yeah, but they are accepting those that come from the United Kingdom.
Rwanda has deported pastors. The deal between Rwanda and England, it's a monetary deal that says, pay us for each illegal immigrant that is in your country. So it's an organized, a formalized arrangement.
All right.
Ours is not formalized. People are climbing on the back of crocodiles to cross into our country.
Okay.
And something that can eat them, they jump on its back for it to be a ship to cross the river with. We went to the border. The lady has never been to the border between Zimbabwe and South Africa. She has never been between the border between South Africa and Lesotho. I've been there.
Let's give you a chance to respond to you then before the time ends, because we literally have run out. Ms. Masego, please respond. The central message is mass deportations.
So let me start maybe at the beginning where Babu Kunene spoke about the countries at war. We've mentioned the DRC, northern Mozambique, just next door, the Sudan, Tigray in Ethiopia. And when we're talking about asylum seekers and refugees, we're not just talking about, conflict, active conflict and war, which we're seeing as well in our continent and elsewhere, but it's also about authoritarian regimes that are inflicting gross human rights violations upon its people. We have people coming from, places such as Uganda, for instance, because of fear of persecution, because of their sexual orientation. So when we're talking about refugees and asylum seekers, Babu Kunene, it's not just about conflicts and wars. It's also about authoritarian regimes where people's basic human rights are not protected and people have to flee because of that. Secondly, I think what I would want for us, to think about when we're thinking about solutions is not to, again, use the defamatory language. Babu Kunene talked about dumping them there as if we're referring to cattle or spoiled goods. We can't refer to human beings as dumping individuals there. That is language that should not be heard in a democratic South Africa. Right. And I think I want to bring us back to the solutions, Oli. And I think for me, it's three things, right? The first is around the border management authority. We need capacity in terms of personnel, in terms of, financing of the institution. We need the expertise in terms of ensuring that we have our borders properly managed.
Yeah.
Two, we need to have proper data. There is a lack of data of actually how many undocumented migrants actually exist in the country. We've seen ridiculous numbers that cannot be backed up by the, parties, that Babu Kunene belongs to. Those numbers are fabricated. They are completely false. We don't have data.
Ms. Thirdly,
yes.
I'm sorry. I have to interrupt you. I think we're going to have to reschedule this because it is a very emotive subject. And I can tell you in studio here, Kenny Kunene is itching to also respond. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this discussion. And I doubt that we have reached a middle ground. Mr. Kunene, I want to thank you very much for your time.
You must give us enough time.
I understand, and we will dedicate
She agrees with me
a lot of time.
That there are illegal immigrants that are not accounted for and data is not correct.
I'm aware, but we have to leave the discussion here. Otherwise, I'll be in trouble. Thank you.
Because you dress well, I'll leave it here.
Thank you very much for your time.